Welcome to Time Tête-à-Tête with me, Pallavi Suresh Talavlikar. Time Tête-à-Tête is an idea that is conceptualized because of my 18 years plus of experience as a chartered accountant, working with multinational professional services firms for 16 of those 18 years, and the last 2 years where I've donned the hat of an entrepreneur. During my tenure with multinational professional services firms and on my own now, I've had an opportunity to meet several people, clients, and I've been influenced by them in so many ways. But the one influence that has remained with me over the last decade and a half, which is 15 years now, is that of a man who's been a mentor to me. A mentor in the true sense, someone who invests in the people he really invests in. He's been responsible largely for most of what I know today, and he's really held my hand through difficult and challenging times as well. The person I'm going to present to you very shortly is somebody I know as a person who's extremely diligent, extremely confident, always on time, very prepared, always thinking of client customization, and I can go on. But without much ado, let me introduce you, or rather present to you because he needs no introduction, Mr. Ketan Arvind Dalal. Welcome, Ketan, and thank you so much for giving me the time to spend with you once again. I know you've really invested in me over the last 15 years, and the purpose of us to sit and have this kind of a discussion today is for the influence that you've cast upon me to be cast upon all the viewers and the listeners to this particular video as well, because I'm sure that there's so much that I have learned from you, and I'd love for them to take back post this session so many things that they will also be able to use, implement in their lives and add value to their professional careers. So thank you for letting me into your beautiful home. I think it's lovely of you to have spent that Sunday at your residence and to have allowed me this luxury and liberty yet again.
Thank you very much, Pallavi, and I look forward to this as well, and I hope that my thoughts are useful to the viewers.
So before we begin, Ketan, I wanted to, everybody knows you as the professional and the friend that you are, and everybody's has seen the professional side of you. What perhaps people would like to know, and I for sure would have wanted to if I was in their place, is the how behind the who. So how did it all start for you? Just as a little bit of a background that I'd like to share with the audience. I know you started with your father's firm, which is late Sri Arvind Dalal, and then you co-founded RSM. Then you donned the hat of the joint tax leader at PwC for so many years. And now again, you're back to entrepreneurship with Katalyst being your baby, and it's a very successful firm. So take us through this journey. I'm sure it's one of those rare stories where people have started from their own firm, moved on to multinational setups such as professional service firms, your own entrepreneur model again. So
I qualified in 1981. It's now been 42 years, and as you mentioned, I was a part of my father's firm. Early in that journey, I realized that chartered accountant firms were getting slaughtered in terms of just being routine, traditional service providers with two legs, the audit leg and the tax leg. And just as any other traditional firm, I started like that. As I moved on in that journey over the next 5-7 years, I realized that unless one moves up the value chain, unless one carves out some particular niche, the ability to grow oneself, the ability to add more value to clients can get impacted. And therefore started doing a little more specialized work. But remember, the economy, Pallavi, had not opened at that time.
Yes.
The one inflection point that I can distinctly remember and I will never forget is July 24, 1991. That was the day when the new industrial policy was announced. And the key dimension, India, by the way, had just 2 months of foreign exchange reserves. Okay, wow. A couple of $1 billion.
Okay.
Of course, value at that time, numbers at that time were small, but 2 months was nothing.
Yeah.
We could have been bankrupt in the next few months. And the finance minister was Manmohan Singh. So as I said, on 24th July, that policy was announced. And once that policy was announced, one of the key dimensions of that policy was liberalization, including FDI.
Right.
And the FDI liberalization gave me that opportunity to specialize in other areas. So for example, joint ventures. At that time, 100% FDI was not permitted in most areas. So it used to be joint ventures, and that gave me an understanding of how joint ventures function. So, those kind of things sort of evolved. And then I realized that, clients will want more integrated services. And through a series of coincidences, friendships, and thinking about the future, in 1997 September, as you said, I was one of the 4 co-founders of the firm. It then became RSM. RSM ultimately merged into PwC in 2007, and then I continued there for 10 years. And then in 2017, a couple of years before my retirement date, my scheduled retirement date, I sort of prematurely exited and formed Katalyst Advisors. So that has been my journey. So, it's been sort of strange in one sense that both ends of the spectrum is a sort of personalized professional services firm. One at that time, as I said, the traditional one, and now a niche one, and in between a large Indian firm and a sort of part of a multinational network firm, which was PwC.
Wow, that's as varied as it gets. So you spoke about limited reserves. India, looking at that scenario versus a 5 trillion economy that we're set to get to very soon.
Right.
What do you make of it, and what are your thoughts vis-a-vis India?
I think, let me just step back and look at the bigger picture first. I think at no time, at least that I can remember in the last 40 years of my professional experience, have I seen the turbulence in the world of geopolitics and obviously therefore the economy that I have seen. Compared to that, India is definitely in a better place for a variety of reasons. I think we have managed it well, we have managed COVID well, we have managed the economy well, relatively we have managed inflation well, and we also have a significant benefit of a very large domestic demand base, and that has also helped. Having said this, if you look at the geopolitical situation, you have obviously the Russia-Ukraine war that is occupying huge mind space. But remember, there is an even bigger issue, which is the China-US tensions. The China and Taiwan issue is a subset of that. So and when 2 of the world's superpowers would contribute in the aggregate 40% of the world's GDP, if they are in eyeball to eyeball conflict, and I may be dramatizing this a bit, it is not good for the world. What is also happening is countries are being forced to take sides. And it is so complicated. Now, should India side with Russia?
Yeah.
It is complicated by the cozy relationship, maybe because of circumstances between Russia and China. So, these kind of things. So, as I said, Russia, Ukraine, China, US, China, Taiwan. You also have others. You have a situation in Sudan, in Bolivia, in Israel. You have all sorts of things today. And the world, Pallavi, being so integrated, when you have so much turmoil, to imagine or to just be in the cocoon and believe that it will not impact the economy and will not impact India is not an appropriate thought. And I think there will be an impact at some stage, in some ways. Hopefully, some of these things will get better, but I think they may get worse before they get better.
Wow, so that's good news, but one has to be very careful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. And what do you make of it for our profession, Ketan? Because now we're seeing we're looking at the AI scenario, and a lot of us today realize that compliance is becoming a little more well managed without really the intervention of people because of artificial intelligence, because of certain technology upgradation. So a large part of our population as chartered accountants, and I'm mindful that the audience today comprises of chartered accountants and others, and we are going to have a large number of young professionals who are from not just tax, but say an audit background, from the industry background as well. So this answer perhaps is very useful to everybody, considering that AI is impacting us in a big way. So where do you think as a profession we're going?
So I think one aspect, Pallavi, as you said, was the artificial intelligence. And the other day, one of my colleagues, punched a question on ChatGPT for getting a family settlement agreement. And lo and behold, it came out.
Wow.
And it was a good document. So, something which would have taken a good professional some 10 hours to draft came out in 10, 20 seconds. So, yes, there will be an impact. But, if you just step back from AI and look at the other picture, first of all, the complexity of the existing environment has gone up significantly from a commercial standpoint. Imports have several issues, exports have several issues. As I said, the world, the issues of geopolitics, etc., has made the world very complex, has made the business very complex. That's point one. Point two, the regulatory environment globally and in the world is becoming more and more and more heavy, constricting in some sense. Sometimes I'm worried that is all of this really required? Unfortunately, maybe in the world and also in India, we have entered into an era of outlier legislation. So let me give you examples. Look at the Companies Act 2013, which came after many committees. Now, it is so prescriptive, so detailed that some of it may not be required. You do not require a private limited company to go through a preferential allotment valuation. So those kind of things, which was not there in the earlier act. You look at audit, you look at the auditing profession. You have NFRA. You have very, very complex Ind AS standards based on IFRS. So then the regulators and sometimes the public does not, and mostly the public actually, does not understand even the role of an auditor. So the auditing profession has become very, very onerous.
Yes.
If you look at the tax profession, for example, you have faceless assessments. Your ability to explain to the person on the other side is getting compromised. So it has its advantages, but it has its challenges.
Right.
So I think it depends, Pallavi, on which segment one is talking about. But one thing is clear, we are living in a world of disruption. There have been lots of disruptions and there will be lots of disruptions. So this regulatory environment is a disruption.
Yes.
So unless from a professional standpoint, I think the heart of the issue is the ability to add value. So if one is in a niche, something niche skill, and of course the world is getting siloed, our profession is getting siloed, niche skill which has continuing value, that will be, to my mind, because that cannot be substituted by AI.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if one is having a niche skill which is needed, whether one is in employment or one is in the profession, that will not go away. But it means that the space is getting constricted. So anybody who is into the generic commoditized thing will obviously have a constraining factor of that in the career.
Sure. That's very helpful to know. So, talking about leadership now, because obviously we look up to leaders such as yourself. And I remember that when PwC, and I was a part of it back then, PwC went through a crisis scenario with the massive exodus happening, and you came in as the joint tax head then. I'd love for you to share some of your experiences. What was it like for you? Because I know that things were going really smooth until something like that struck, and your learnings from having taken over as the joint tax leader, including some of the mistakes that you'd like to share with us and our audience.
No, sure. That's a good question. So first, without getting into the details of that crisis situation, first on the leadership, many of us, including myself, may not be born natural leaders. We have to learn along the way. And leadership does not mean necessarily being a CEO or a CEO equivalent of an organization. One could be the leader within a large organization of a 20 people team. That is also leadership. And it is from that one grows. And one of the things I've learned is that in order to be a leader, you need followers.
Sure.
And how do you get those followers? It's not one thing. It's a cocktail of a variety of things. I mean, for many years, I've been thinking about it more as a sort of CDC BET formula. It's my own concoction. So the C is, for commercial acumen and content. The D, which is an extension, is domain knowledge. The last C is for, communication and connections, relationships. The VET are a little bit more softer. Vision, empathy. Empathy is a very important trait of leadership. And trust. The trust part is for the leader in his team and for the team to have the confidence in the leader to trust. So it's a lot of hard factors, soft factors, many of them more soft factors. So I think to grow into the leadership, one has to develop all these facets. On the crisis part which you talked about, It was like a mini black swan event. And in any crisis, I mean, one of the biggest ones we've had is COVID, right?
Right.
I mean, but taking it to the granular level of what you asked, Pallavi, in a crisis, one of the important things is to ascertain what are the dimensions. And I realized that the single biggest dimension is people. In a professional sense, we are in the knowledge business. We are a people business. The heart of the issue was to retain the team, to give them the confidence that the organization can survive this, and to walk the talk in terms of specific actions. Now, whether it was pointing out to people that an exodus of that nature could also be an opportunity for them to grow, for example.
Sure.
And many of them have grown, and I'm proud to see many of them have really grown, and they're still there.
Absolutely.
So, that kind of thing, getting those people quickly up to speed with what is happening and also leveraging their ability. This getting them up to speed is the communication aspect. Communication is very important for a leader under any situation, particularly in a crisis situation. I learned that it is better to over-communicate than under-communicate. Whether it is town halls, whether it is regular mails, whether it is informal conversations in elevators, in the pantry, whichever way. Communicate. Because otherwise, you will have water cooler conversations, you could have rumors,
right.
You could have chaos. So I think I learned that, but I think there are, of course, a hell of a lot of hard things, and the ability for the leadership to work together.
Right.
That was important, because if the leadership is not aligned, then things do not go well even in a good situation, let alone in a crisis. So these are some of the learnings.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. One thing I've realized, because I was a part of this myself, is that you lead with example. So when you say that how does a leader have followers, you have your set of followers because of you leading with example. I've never seen you've been so disciplined. I've seen your time management skills. They're wonderful. Not only do you advise us on how do you start a meeting, but you always start with the end in mind. So some of these aspects that we've seen you yourself contribute as a part of meetings, discussions, have been real learning sessions or learning lessons for us. So that's been wonderful. Now, coming back to a little bit we spoke about leadership, and for the last 2 years, I've been an entrepreneur myself, and under your guidance, have thankfully gotten to where we are at right now. One thing that I realized you helped me with, and that's a massive mindset change, which was the aspect of commercial thinking. From getting out of your technical hat or from getting out of your employment mode to getting into the entrepreneurial mode, of course, it comes with its own set of challenges, and I'd like you to throw a little more light on that. You talk about stability as an entrepreneur, how much of that is compromise, etc. So if you can just, because I've had the good fortune of hearing it from you many a times and therefore leading the life that you had sort of carved out for me as a professional, but if you can also throw a little more light on the commercial thinking aspect of it, how it influences clients, and how does it benefit everybody as a professional?
So I think, Pallavi, the commercial thinking part is not just restricted to being an entrepreneur. So one could be a part of a big four, one could be a part of a large multinational company in industry, or a large Indian company, or even a medium-sized Indian company. One has to realize that businesses are run to make profits, to generate revenues, and therefore the other parts, so let's say tax, for example, or the need to have an audit done, are subsets of the larger part of business. So one has to realize that it is not, for example, as tax professionals, I sometimes say, you cannot build your business around tax. Transfer pricing, for example. You have to first see what makes commercial sense.
So your CRT formula.
The CRT formula, commercial regulatory tax. And I think commercial acumen has too many dimensions. So for example, let's say you're talking to the C-suite, CEO, CIO, CFO. Commercial thinking will enable you to take the conversation one level up, because the more senior you get, so let's say a director or an associate director in a big four, or even a general manager finance in industry talking to his CEO, the conversation level then has to go one up as opposed to saying this is the section, this is the LODR provision, this is section 175 of the Companies Act and so on and so forth. It has to go one level up. For that, the bigger picture, the commercial thinking is important. And there are, of course, many dimensions to it. So, for example, sector knowledge. Today, sectoral issues have become so important. An insurance sector has completely different challenges from even something else in the financial services sector.
Sure.
Banking. So, it looks like banking and financial services. But within banking and financial services, there are 20 different things. So, that commercial thinking of understanding what is this business? What are the competitive challenges for this business? What are the opportunities in this business? How is this business run? What are the levers of this business? What is the SWOT analysis of the business? If one has that kind of thinking, I think it helps one to become a more well-rounded professional, whether it is in practice, whether it's in industry, in anything.
But I can assure you, and based on experience and feedback that I've had from clients over the last couple of years, they know that now we're not thinking tax. They know we're thinking just like them. We're in their shoes. We feel their pain and we address it accordingly. So that's again a big learning. So thank you for that. And one more aspect which I'd like you to cover, which is phenomenal as far as the parameters of a successful career are concerned. So you often talk about the two pillars, content and connect. If you can just share a lot of that with our audience, because I'm sure they hugely benefit from it.
So Pallavi, we did speak about some of it. But to elaborate to the specific question, I have always believed that growth of a professional services provider and even in industry depends on the twin pillars of content and connect, because there are so many things which are subsets of that. So the content it could be broader knowledge, which we spoke about. It could be domain technical knowledge. So if you are a person in, let's say, risk management, your understanding of internal controls. If you are a person who is a professional in cyber security, your understanding of what can happen, what is the cyber thing that can get compromised, what will it mean if this data leaks, that knowledge, and of course how to prevent that, how to build firewalls. Even forensic, you are in audit, the accounting standards, the Ind AS. If you are in tax, something else. If you are in transaction structuring, the integrated thinking. So all that is the content part.
Right.
The connect part is the relationship part, the softer part. Because, of course, sometimes the content leads you to the connect. Because somebody refers your name, you meet a potential new client, he has a problem, he believes you can solve this, you give him some solution, you give him some pointers, you give him some direction. That itself builds the connect.
Yes.
Okay, and sometimes you already have the connect, and that enables you to have the opportunity to demonstrate the content. But at the end of the day, you have to have content and connect together. And India is particularly, by the way, on the connect part. I believe that India is much more of a relationship country. I would say a lot of Asia is relationship based. Europe is less relationship based. In US, it is much less personal relationship based. It is more institutional relationship based.
Do you want to give an example of in the US how you have? Yeah, that would be great. The building.
I know I spoke to you once about it. Of course, it's a kind of different kind of example, but I always say that in US, a building talks to a building. In India, a person talks to a person even in a large organization. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but in India, the personal rapport makes, to my mind, very often an outsized impact on the relationship between two institutions. Because we are much more emotional, we are much more sort of personal relationship driven. That's the way India is as a country. So I think that connect part in this context becomes even more important. Of course, just because of a relationship, your boss is not going to promote you. Just because of a relationship, a person is not going to give you work. So as I said, it has to be an integrated thing.
Absolutely. And on the connect part, one more aspect which has really helped me in my career is about investing in people when you're younger.
Yeah.
So let's say I've started off on my professional journey and the person at the other end who's a client could be a young manager, just like me. But both of us grow, right? He grows or she grows in her or his respective organization or elsewhere, and I've grown in mine. So it's only when that individual suddenly becomes the decision maker for the organization that you realize that your investment over the years has paid you off. And of course, you haven't started with the intention of monetizing it in any way. But at the same time, it's a natural outcome of your connect and your investment in that individual over the years. So that's another learning from you, and I think that's been phenomenally helpful to me. So thank you for that again. And coming to my next point, and we spoke about reading and domain knowledge being important. But one question that has often come to my mind, Ketan, and this is more as an appraisee. Today I have the good fortune of being an appraiser myself, but when you're an appraisee, your seniors often point out to you areas where you need to improve. And they almost take it for granted your areas which are you're good already. So you end up focusing on your weaknesses more, and the question that's often come to my mind is whether I should have back then focused on my weaknesses and tried to improve upon them, because there's only that much that I could have done about them, or should I have invested further in my strengths and my capabilities where I was recognized or complimented. And therefore that dilemma was always something that was on my mind. Of course, I have a more clearer vision today and an answer today, but if you can throw some more light on what aspect does an individual who has been often pointed out or called out for areas where the person needs to improve, how does the person find a balance?
This is a difficult one to answer, but first of all, if you love the work that you're doing, so first you have to find the work that you love to do.
Right.
If you love the work, the passion will automatically come in, because you're already passionate about it. So it's not even a question of passion will come in. It's there, already latently there. And that will enable you to generate good work. But of course, you have to make sure that the work which you love is also meaningful. Because you may love something, but is it meaningful? Does it add value? So you may have financial aspirations. Some may not have financial aspirations which are that high. Some may have, say, okay, I'm okay to get less financial rewards, but I like this work because I believe it is more self-satisfying, for example. So as I said, the first thing is to find what you love, and I think then the quality of the work will automatically become better. Once the quality becomes better, the consequence will be growth in most cases. So I think that is what, so rather than focusing on your weaknesses, I think one should leverage the strengths in this manner. Having said which, there are some weaknesses which I think can be major constraining factors because they are a sort of non-negotiable kind of thing. So let's take in our profession, one of the things in most cases, we talked about commercial thinking, and I think that's a critical one. The other one I can think of, if that's a weakness, as I said, it can be a constraining factor, is communication skill, articulation ability, both written and oral. Because today, the ability to get the attention of a person to listen to you, people's attention span is very narrow. The guy is looking at his phone.
Right.
The woman is looking at her phone. Then somebody is on Facebook, somebody is on Twitter, somebody is on LinkedIn. The attention span is very, very limited. And therefore, the communication ability and the ability to hit the right notes is very critical. So whether it's an email communication or whether it's an oral communication, whether it's a telephone call, whether it's a WhatsApp, I think that is very critical. Communication ability. But other than that, as I said, at a more broader and a more strategic level, find the work that you love and leverage that and build on those strengths, that's better. But for that, again, another point is the ability to see the future. So in the kind of work that you're doing, if you can recognize the disruptions in advance and plan for those disruptions, then the path along that growth, the work that you love, the passion that you have for that work, will also translate into some material benefit, something meaningful, some value add for your employer, value add for your clients and your colleagues. So I think it's a combination of things, Pallavi.
That brings me to my next point, and this is something I've known about you. You anticipate change, and that's where you have the first mover advantage. I remember back in 1995, you co-authored a book on transfer pricing, whereas the regulations related to transfer pricing were promulgated in 2001. So you were almost 7 years ahead of your time. And that was fantastic because I've always seen that you've been the person who can anticipate change a lot better than most of the people I've known. So how do you manage that? And where do you draw this kind of energy from? Because I see you start your day at 6 o'clock. And sometimes even before that, you spend on a daily basis a good 1.5 to 2 hours to read relevant literature, which is concerning the work that we do and otherwise. And you encourage everybody else to do that as well. I've seen that you play golf. I've seen that you work really hard. You attend meetings. I know after this you have another meeting to attend in spite of it being a Sunday.
So I think let me just step back and look at the bigger picture around change. Just as in the geopolitical, which is the unfortunate part, on the more fortunate part, even though more challenging, again, in the last 10, 20 years, and I suspect in the next 10, 15 years, the amount of change has been and will be significant. So, let me give you an example. Look at the situation on electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Okay, one could not imagine this 2 years ago. I remember when 10 years back, I think somebody who was the vice president of the US at that, I can't remember. There was an event and he was talking about climate change and I just could not relate to it. Today, I realize how important that conversation was.
Yeah.
Okay, so because of that renewable energy, for example, look at online, look at e-commerce, look at what it has done. Look at digital payments. Okay, now you will have ONDC, okay, open network of digital commerce like an open Amazon,
Wow,
if you will. Now all these changes, the ability to first to recognize that this change will come and then try and figure out by connecting the dots what it will mean. So if you are in industry, what it will mean for your employer, etc. So we spoke about artificial intelligence, so what it will mean. So I think as somebody said, I think more about the future because that's where I'm going to spend the rest of my life.
right.
So if you don't think about the future, you will, I think, find it difficult and challenging to carve the path which you need to traverse. So I think it's important to do that. And a lot of it, comes out of good conversations, it comes out of reading, it comes out of thinking. So I think, there are a lot of people who do this and I try and follow those people also. What are they thinking? Whether it is Twitter, whether when I get the opportunity talking to them. But I think the heart of the issue is you have to give that time to think about the future. You cannot get completely bogged down and worried about it, but you need to recognize that we are living in a world where the pace of change is tremendous. And therefore, what is there today will not be there tomorrow.
True that.
And some of it will go not just tomorrow, but today afternoon. That kind of thing. So yeah, this is at least the way I approach things. If you like to do it, somehow you will find the energy to do it.
Yeah, that's true. So that's the part that I'm talking about. You've truly been an inspiration to so many.
Thank you so much.
Great. And one more aspect which you've often focused upon is integrated thinking. So I see a lot of us when especially we're working in larger organizations where our role is limited to a SBU and at times a industry. We don't get the opportunity of integrated thinking because you have other teams that do that for you. So you have often emphasized on integrated thinking and I'd love for you to share with our audience. I know it's made a big difference to my way of thinking and being. So if you can share with our audience the importance of that.
Yeah, if I were to give Pallavi a crude example of how people think in silos, I think about it as, let's say, a contractor doing a light repair comes to your house. Okay? So he climbs onto a table, he repairs the light, but the table breaks.
Okay.
Okay? So because he's not understanding that the light is one part of it, but I don't want him to repair the light and break the table.
Sure.
So it's a very crude example, but I think the integrated thinking is very, very crucial. So for example, in the kind of work that we do as a firm, which is M&A structuring, okay? You referred in the beginning to what I keep calling the CRT formula, commercial, regulatory, tax. So you have to integrate these things. So if you look at, let's say, a business transfer through the tax lens, it may not work because commercially, what may happen is that the buyer may not want the business transfer, he may want a share transfer.
Yeah, yes.
There may be different converging thoughts between the buyer and the seller. So you need to have integrated thinking when you are looking at two counterparties, even when you are looking at it from the perspective, let's say, of your own client or yourself, or if you are in industry from your employer's perspective, what are the key drivers of that decision, which are the non-negotiables, which are the ones you can give up, that integrated commercial thinking. So even within commercial thinking, there has to be integrated. Then to link it up with regulations and tax of the type of work at least that we do. Regulations are important, obviously very, very important, because you may have this particular intent, but the regulation may not permit it. You may want to combine two businesses, but there will be regulatory constraints in doing so. So I think it is very, very critical. And to your point about having been a part of the Big Four, you as well as I, and then you later having been worked for another large firm. Unfortunately, we have entered into the era of specialization. So, for force, you will have silos. So it is not possible to escape that fact today. Today, nobody goes to a restaurant. You go to a Lebanese restaurant, or a Korean one, or a Chinese one, or a North Indian one.
Yes.
You don't think of it as a restaurant.
Yes.
You think of it, oh, should we have Chinese?
Right, absolutely.
Or should we have Lebanese? That's the way you think. Therefore, the era of specialization, unfortunately, will keep many of us in silos. To get out of that silo, because see, you are looking at the client like this. Each quote unquote SBU if you are a professional service firm. But the client is looking at you as like this. He is wanting to solve his problem. He is not concerned about your SBU. Then therefore your ability to think from his shoes. What is the problem that he is trying to solve, and am I in a position to offer that solution? If I am not, then I should be there. If I am, but I need another colleague from another service line. So for example, I am trying to solve a tax problem, but that is an accounting dimension. Unless I foresee that, unless I anticipate that, unless I plan for that, unless I get the internal resources converging to help me to address the client's issue in an integrated manner or an employer's issue in an integrated manner, it is always going to be a suboptimal effort. So I think one has to sort of reconcile the reality of the silo with the need for integrated approach.
Thank you for that, Ketan. That also brings me to my next question. We have a lot of people working from home even today. And I know we've discussed your thoughts on work from home in the past as well. Also, having started off 42 years ago, the concept of work from home is obviously very new to you because you've believed and you've just spoken a lot about connect, and I think a lot of that is established when you meet. Can you help us understand how these professionals who today are working from home, and a large part of them are going to be our audience as well, and the constraints or the challenges that they face around doing that? And often it is because of the organizational decision, and now because of so many organizations giving up on space as well. So it's preferred to work from home or work alternately from office, with teams taking turns to come to office.
So let me switch the question around, Pallavi. Let me park that issue of work from home separately and just let me address the larger issue of, connecting, interacting, collaborating first. So I think human interaction is critical, particularly in our kind of work. We are in the knowledge profession, knowledge business, whichever way we want to look at it. And interacting with your colleagues, generating ideas, innovative, creative thinking, addressing solutions, just learning from one another, interacting with clients, all that is very, very important. And we link it up with the work from home, and therefore I think first one has to realize that this interaction is very critical. On the part of this informal thing, which is actually a sort of unrelated question in some sense, it's a part of the connect part. In order to connect, one will have, let's say, a meeting in a boardroom. But a lot of connects are built at informal settings. It could be a gym, it could be a seminar, it could be a wedding, it could be a music program, it could be a golf game, it could be a badminton game, it could be watching a cricket match together, it could be all sorts of things. So I think it takes time. So I think again, if one has to do that, the time management is also very critical. So if one is able to manage time, then you are able to release time for these other things. Now coming to the work from home, that's an additional complication that is nowadays. So I am not against work from home. Given the challenges of commuting in metros, whether it is Delhi, Chennai, Bangalore, Bombay, commuting is becoming a huge issue. And luckily, MS Teams and Zoom has made it possible to have virtual meetings, which in many cases are as effective, sometimes more effective than physical meetings. But I don't think it's an either or answer. I think it is very critical to interact, as I said, and therefore some work from home is okay, but a lot of it, I think, will need personal interaction to have meaningful conversations and meaningful solutions to work problems.
Thank you for that. So you're basically referring to a hybrid model where a large part of it is working from office, but yes, at times, considering the constraints, they could. So I've tried to cover a lot of questions that the audience had separately sent out to me as well. One of them was about what would your advice be? And I think you've covered parts of it in the conversation that we've had this far. But what would your advice be to professionals who are looking to start off on their own entrepreneurial journey? So we've had people ask that question because I believe that today, and having done that myself a couple of years ago, I see a lot of opportunity, and hence it'll be very useful to understand from you.
So I think it would be the same whether it's a profession, whether it's a business, but I suspect you're talking more about our segment of the profession, and therefore I'll address that part more meaningfully. The most important thing to realize is that when one is wanting to set up the entrepreneurial journey or embark on the entrepreneurial journey, what is it one talking about? Is it talking about a solo? Is one talking about a solo model? Is one talking about a model where 3 or 4 like-minded professionals are getting together? Are you thinking of setting up a large organization? Given the audience which is likely to be watching it, I suspect it will be either a sort of solo model or it's say 2 or 3 people getting together just like you did. And that kind of a model, I suppose, is what you are currently talking about. I think there are several facets to this. The first is, in an entrepreneurial model, one has to realize that the comfort of a regular paycheck just disappears. So if you have financial commitments in the form of EMI, education, heavy education cost for even a small child's education today costs a lot. Those kind, and you do not have other sources of income, no inheritance, no backup, etc., this can become a challenge, of course, because the uncertainty of that initial phase is very real, number one. Number two, the setup costs are much higher in many cases than what one thinks. But the most important thing is, who is going to get you the revenue that you're looking for? What are the kind of services that you're going to render? Is there a demand for those services? Who is that demand from? Do you have an anchor client or clients? And very importantly, what is the team? So if you are in a complete solo model, then your level of skill has to be such that in spite of the solo model, a person will consult. So for example, this can happen in litigation, but it may not happen in most areas of practice that we are looking at. So if one is looking at setting up something, the other issue is what is the team? If one is having partners or semi-partners, is there a cultural fit? This, I believe, is a very important issue. I remember one phrase from Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. When they set up Berkshire Hathaway decades ago, one important principle that they set out with, and I followed till today, and both are past 90, mind you, they said, we will manage the business, not one another.
Wow.
So if you are going to spend your time managing one another, then who's looking at the business? Because you are distracted with this relationship. So I think that is also very important. So as I said, to summarize, are you okay with the uncertainty of income? Are you realizing that you will need some anchors? Do you have them? Do you have the team? Do you have the mindset to live with that uncertainty? And of course, do you believe that there is a client need which you are trying to address and you are in a position to fulfill that need?
That's a great response, Ketan. And I know that a lot of this has applied to me individually in my personal capacity when I set out on my entrepreneurial journey. One more message from you which has taken me this far is to stay the course. So that's another aspect that you had put into my mind when I started off. So yes, staying the course helps, and you will have those phases, but very short-lived phases of uncertainty. And if you have your mind at the right place, then obviously the results are for all to see. So great response from your side. And I know we've spent a lot of time on some of these things, so I'll ask you one last question for this session before I put you through a rapid fire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I know it's possibly going to be a first time for this kind of a discussion to end with a rapid fire, but considering that we also are other than professionals, and there is a lot of interest and excitement in our lives as well, I think rapid fire is going to justify the end of this. But the last question, and I know it's you'll have to go back in time, but had Mr. Ketan Dalal, had he been starting off right now as a qualified chartered accountant, what stream of service would he have opted for? Because we've spoken about tax, we've spoken about audit, we've spoken about industry. But if you were to start your career today as we speak, what would excite you the most as a chartered accountant?
It's difficult to do that having spent my whole life doing what I have done. While I'm not sure what I would have done, I can think of 4 or 5 areas in the CA professional kind of framework that one could look at, and which were not there to the extent they are today. They were not there some years ago. So, for example, cyber security. Okay, and of course, much of it is by IT professionals more than CAs. Say the valuation requirement. Today, valuations have become very important with mergers and acquisition activity and regulatory aspects and compulsions, swap ratios, etc., etc. Corporate finance took investment banking, risk management. Okay, the amount of time that boards of directors are spending on risk management is amazing, because organizations are getting large and people are very worried about risk. So while I can't answer that question of what I would have done, I would certainly have looked at these 4 or 5, because each of this in its own way has opportunities, needs, and therefore they are also very exciting sectors, each of them in their own different ways. So I would say that not one, but there are several others.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'm sure this is an answer a lot of young chartered accountants are going to benefit from as well. Having said which, we need these young Turks to come and join us as well. So yes, tax is important. It continues to be. And
sorry, just before I forget, if you want many times one finds that one is in a silo or in something which one feels one is not interested as much, or one wants to move out, either because the interest is less or you believe the opportunity is less. And then there is a great struggle in shifting. Because if you shift, it is almost like a shift in career. And then one has to take temporary hits. So that's a very, very crucial decision. And if you want to do that, the sooner you do it, the better.
Oh, great. That's important as well. Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much, Ketan. Thank you for this wonderful session.
Thank you.
I've been a beneficiary as always, and I'm so glad and grateful and delighted to have spent this time with you once again. So moving on, shall we start with the rapid fire now?
Please.
Okay, great. So I'll ask you 5 to 6 questions.
Okay.
And with some of them I'll give you choices to pick from, and with some I'll ask you for responses.
Okay.
So let's start.
I'm not used to this, but I'll try my best.
Great. So you've been an entrepreneur, and you again are one, and you were also a part of a large professional service multinational team leading the practice as a joint tax leader. Pick one, the entrepreneur or the joint tax leader.
I would say both, because even as a joint tax leader, as a part of a large network firm, in my mind I was always an entrepreneur. I never thought of it as a partnership or an employment, because the elements of entrepreneurship. So I would say both.
Tilted towards the entrepreneur.
I think tilted towards the entrepreneur part, because that's more in my DNA.
Okay, great. I know you've been an ambidextrous cricketer, and I know you love your golf. So pick one. Would it be golf or cricket for you?
Golf, clearly golf.
Okay, so golf it is.
Yeah, I would say golf, because I think the whole feel of the golf course, it's a very different feel. Cricket is a great game, but I am more tilted now towards golf.
Okay.
The feel is totally different. It's very difficult, Pallavi, to pinpoint and put your finger on it. But as I said, the feel of golf is totally different. So I love it very much.
Wonderful. Okay. So now coming to some personal food choices. Would you go for a healthy diet or would you go for a tasty diet?
That's a complicated one. I would say healthy, which is tasty as well.
Okay.
But if it's tasty but not healthy, then I would sort of tilt towards the healthy part.
Let's talk about a little bit of travel now. So you've traveled the world, I know, and multiple times over. So now when you opt for a travel destination, would it be a city-like destination for you, or would it be serenity that'll that will really encourage you to take that time away, because I know you really value your time and you've done great as a professional in time management. So I'm sure you'll invest your time where really you have to. So would it be travel, which is to a serene location, or would it be more like a city?
Yeah, I assume it's a holiday, obviously, you're talking
Yes.
about. So I would go for the serene destination. Something like, it could be in India as well. But if it is abroad, it could be a Switzerland, it could be an Ireland, it could be a New Zealand, something like that. So serene is clearly less cities, more serene.
Okay. The last two questions, the second last of which is, if not a chartered accountant, what would you have been?
Oof. Well, when I was young, I was thinking about becoming a cricketer or a pilot.
Wow.
But these are, things as children you think about, and as life moves on, even a doctor. I actually very seriously examined. I remember that time it was an 11 plus 4, not a 10 plus 2 plus
Right.
whatever the model is today. And I remember when I passed my SSC, the question was whether I should apply to Sydenham College for Commerce or Jain College for Medicine. And virtually the decision for Sydenham was taken on the way to, both colleges are into
Yes.
parallel lanes. So it was taken 15 minutes before I reached Sydenham College. It was that close. So I think the doctor thing is, on a more serious note, it was a doctor or a chartered accountant, and I tilted towards the chartered accountant part. The commerce stream, which ultimately translated into becoming a chartered accountant.
I'm sure you'd have made a very good doctor as well, but I'm only glad that you've chosen this field because it helps the likes of us. One last question. If you were to recommend a book to our readers and to our listeners as well, and I know I've been a voracious reader myself, what would that book be? Because this is a habit which I've inculcated quite early in my life and it's helped me immensely. I know you definitely encourage people to read. So other than the routine read that we have, which we have to do as a part of our profession, what would you recommend as a book that our audience, universally, agnostic of age or career status, should read?
So in terms of books, Pallavi, it's difficult to find one, but I tend to read books more the autobiographical or the biographical type. For example, non-fiction. So I was very happy to read Barack Obama's biography.
Okay.
It was a very, very interesting one. So, I read those kind of books, sometimes less now, but otherwise books on management, health, golf. So it's very difficult to point one book. And again, as one grows, one's tastes change, etc. So I think whatever you like, but I would think that this biographical or autobiographical or people who have really made a difference to the world, I think those are the kind of books I would recommend. But I can't think of one specific book.
That's great to know, because I myself prefer non-fiction over fiction, and I've read some of the books that you've just referred to. So wonderful. Thank you so much for this time, and thank you so much for your insights, inputs. They've been very helpful to people like myself over the 18 long years of my career, 15 of course of having known you. But I'm sure that everybody who's watching this is going to take back a lot. There's going to be a lot of food for thought. There's going to be course correction, but all of it is going to help and add to their lives as professionals. Wonderful talking to you yet again. Thank you, Mr. Ketan Dalal. Thank you.
Pallavi, thank you so much. I hope this is helpful, and we're really happy to have chatted with you. Thank you.
Thank you.